Hi there, my name is Florian. I am from Germany, as you can probably hear, and I welcome you to my in-depth technical information video for the new Porsche Taycan. So get ready, I hope you've got some time, because Porsche released very much information on the new Taycan, though this video is going to be very long. Firstly, I want to say, in this video I will not judge if the Tesla Model S or any other electric car is a better car than the Taycan. I just want to give you as much technical information about the first fully electric car from Porsche as possible. But if I can see the opportunity to briefly compare Porsche's technical solution to a competitor, I will do so, without judging. But before I start, I will tell you how to pronounce Porsche and Taycan correctly, as if you are a German. It's Porsche, Porsche. Never say Porsche or Porsche. That is all wrong, please don't do that. Taycan is also pronounced in a very German way. It's Taycan, not Taken or something like this. It is Taycan. Porsche, Taycan. How did Porsche develop the name Taycan? At the beginning, Porsche decided a new electric car should have a name without any number. The project team who developed the name consisted of designers, engineers, marketing specialists, sales specialists, lawyers and brand experts. The team developed 600 ideas, which they then gradually carved down to a few favorites. But before that, pairs of native speakers representing 23 languages considered the sound and meaning of the potential model names to rule out unpleasant or unsuitable associations. Lawyers analyzed every conceivable risk of trademark violation, inspected databases around the world containing millions of registered trademarks, revised names, and located rights holders. A task that in the end lasted a year and a half. Finally, the marketing experts selected their favorite names and presented them to the assembled board of Porsche in the autumn of 2017. And the decision was, it's Taycan. And what means Taycan? Taycan is composed of two terms of Turkic origin, Tay and Khan. The word can be roughly translated as soul of a spirited young horse. Alright, let's start with the technical stuff. Porsche will release the Taycan in two versions, the Turbo and the Turbo S. If any of the technical information I will tell you in the next minutes differs per version, I will inform you. I will start with some details of the exterior of the Taycan. Porsche only uses Matrix LED headlights with 84 individually controlled LEDs. They act like every Matrix LED headlight on the market, which means dimming or shutting down one or more LEDs if another vehicle approaches you, but the areas where the approaching vehicle is not dazzled are kept fully illuminated. You can option for a nicer looking headlight with blue daytime running light elements and circuit board graphics inside the headlight housing. This optional headlight also features a different coming home, leaving home animation. Both headlights include the now typical Porsche 4-point daytime running lights. The door handles of the Taycan are flush with the doors, as Tesla does, and for example Jaguar Land Rover started also to do so. The door handles pop out electrically. Porsche offers two wheel dimensions for the Taycan. 20-inch wheels with range-optimized summer tires. They are 245s up front and 285s in the back. The 20-inch wheels are standard for the Turbo. The Turbo S comes with 21-inch wheels with high-performance summer tires as standard. The tires are 265s up front and 305s in the back. The Turbo can option these 21-inch wheels. The optional winter tires are available only in 20-inch for both Taycan models. Porsche says all wheels are optimized for aerodynamics. On the back, we have the typical Porsche design with a light band stretching over the whole width of the car. Inside the light band is the Porsche lettering. In addition, we have a deployable spoiler as the Panamera has, but the one on the Taycan is made from one piece, not three like the Panamera. I will get you some details of the spoiler when I talk about the aerodynamics of the Taycan. You can option a panoramic fixed glass roof. It measures 1 square meter thanks to no usage of a transverse bow. For the first time in a Porsche, low emissivity thermal insulation glass is used for the panoramic fixed glass roof. Porsche applies wafer-thin metal layers to the insulating glass, and Porsche says that this thermal insulation allows short-wave radiation to pass through and reflects long-wave infrared radiation. Porsche is very convinced that the isolation will work, so they did not install a sunshade with the panoramic fixed glass roof. An intermediate layer in the glass structure also provides acoustic insulation for the driver and passengers. Next, I will inform you about the frame of the Porsche Taycan. The Taycan has a fully galvanized body, which means rust will not be an issue in the years to come. Porsche started the galvanization of their cars in the end of the 70s, and it is one of the aspects a manufacturer can do to keep their cars in good shape for decades. The frame of the Taycan consists of only 2 materials, aluminum and steel. Here in this graphic you can see where Porsche used which materials. Interesting points are the sills made from aluminum, marked green in the graphic. Porsche designed it as 7-chamber extruded sections. Porsche says, compared to steel sills, this reduces the number of components per side from 15 to 3, and the weight goes down 3.4 kilograms or 7.5 pounds. Reducing complexity and weight is always a good thing. A special highlight is the bulkhead crossmember, I marked it here, which is manganese boron steel. Special manufacturing processes are used to produce various cross-sections within a tubular component. This way, the bulkhead crossmember has the best strength possible with optimized weight. Apart from the front end and rear end components, which are made from plastic, the complete outer skin is made from aluminum. Porsche says 37% of the Taycan is made from aluminum. What you can also see in this graphic are what Porsche calls foot garages. I marked it here. These are recesses in the floor of the car. Normally there would be battery packs, but to make room for the feet of the passengers in the back, Porsche did not put battery packs where the foots are placed. Porsche offers 2 luggage compartments on the Taycan, one in the front, like Tesla and Audi does, with 84 liters volume, and one in the rear with 366 liters volume. But how big and heavy is the Taycan then? As you can see in my Excel sheet here, the Turbo and the Turbo S have the same length and width, but there are slight differences in height, track and of course weight. With this data we can see that the Taycan is about the same size and weight as a Porsche Panamera Turbo S e-hybrid, which is the most powerful Panamera, or a Tesla Model S performance. Let's switch to the topic of aerodynamics. With a drag coefficient value of 0.22, the Turbo offers the best drag coefficient of all current Porsche models. The Turbo S is slightly worse, with a drag coefficient value of 0.25. This very good aerodynamic performance was achieved through extensive work on the design concept and fine-tuning. Before spending around 1,500 hours in the wind tunnel, the Taycan had already run through 3D computational fluid dynamics simulations and completed around 900 hours in the wind tunnel as a 1-3 model. Porsche also uses what they call air curtains. The air inlets under the headlights direct air over the front wheel housing, shielding the wheel housings from turbulence. And remember, the wheels have also been aerodynamically optimized. The underside of the Taycan is completely flat. Even the suspension links are fully covered and equipped with air ducts. At the rear, as there is no exhaust system, Porsche's engineers implemented an extremely wide rear diffuser. Porsche also uses active aerodynamics at the lower side air intakes at the front. Normally, these air intakes supply air to radiators located on the front of the car left and right. When the chassis control unit reads that the thermal load on the brake discs is too high, it requests targeted cooling of the brake disc through changing air direction with flaps from the radiators to the brakes. This can be the case, for example, on the racetrack or when driving spirited and challenging terrain like the Alps, for example. Porsche also allows the air intakes to be completely closed, so the radiators and brakes don't get any air, to reduce drag and increase range. The usage of the air flaps is always demand driven and depends on the driving mode, speed and cooling requirement of the car. The spoiler on the rear is also part of the active aerodynamics. Depending on the driving situation, the spoiler can use 3 different positions and thus influences the car's drag and rear lift. So it is possible for the Taycan to use the spoiler for best efficiency and range, but it can also be set up with the lowest possible lift on the rear axle, which means maximizing downforce, to achieve the best grip on the rear axle for fast lap times or sporty driving. The Taycan has air suspension as standard, like for example the Panamera and the Cayenne, and this also helps with the aerodynamics. The Tesla Model S and X, as well as the other German offerings, the Mercedes-Benz EQC and the Audi e-tron, have also air suspension. Porsche and the other manufacturers have especially one reason for using air suspension on their electric cars. You can change the ride height depending on the driving situation, so lowering drag by bringing the car closer to the ground. I will go into more detail with the Taycan's air suspension later. My next topic is the passive safety of the Porsche Taycan. The engineers built the battery modules into the body shell structure in such a way that the best possible passive and high voltage safety is achieved in the event of a crash. The structurally integrated battery housing consists of different levels. At the center of this construction is the battery frame, which consists of a seal-welded aluminum structure, a truss structure inside the rigid all-round frame, and additional crash box elements provide protection in the event of an impact. A steel plate protects the battery and the cooling structure against damage from the underside of the car. In comparison to a combustion Porsche, the engineers added additional sensors to reliably disconnect the high voltage equipment in the event of a crash. Also in the event of a more serious accident where the airbag is deployed, the battery connection to the vehicle is disconnected as a precaution, so no voltage is live. Porsche also integrated several high-voltage disconnection points in the Taycan to enable the emergency services to cut the power by hand quickly if necessary. For added protection, all the fuses and bus bars are located centrally in the vehicle, and the battery management system, including the disconnection unit, is also located in a protected area in the center console. When a side crash is happening, the forces generated are dissipated via both the body shell and the integrated battery. In the event of a rear-end crash, all the structural load paths relevant are made of aluminum to optimize weight. For the rear structure, casting technology is used at several structure nodes. Due to the optimized geometrical design, less material was used and functions like mounting points could be integrated in the components. This saved weight. Pedestrian protection is achieved through an active bonnet. Of course, the Taycan has the full range of airbags, beginning with driver and passenger front airbags and knee airbags. On the side, the Taycan features thorax airbags that are integrated in the side bolsters of the front seats, and curtain airbags covering the roof frame and side windows from the A to the C pillar. So 8 airbags as standard. You can option for side airbags in the back, for example when you are driving with kids in the back seats very often. My next topic is one of the pieces that makes a Porsche, the suspension system. At the front, Porsche uses a double wishbone axle with forged aluminum wishbones and hollow cast aluminum lightweight swivel bearings. On the rear axle, a multi-link axle with forged upper aluminum wishbones and hollow cast lower aluminum wishbones is used. The Taycan uses a centrally networked control system for the chassis. Porsche calls it 4D chassis control. It analyzes the current driving situation in all three dimensions: longitudinal, lateral, and vertical acceleration, and then calculates the vehicle status. It then shares the status with the chassis systems in real time. This is then the fourth dimension of chassis control, says Porsche, thus the name 4D chassis control. The result is an integrated response to the current driving situation. In the Taycan, we have a combination of Porsche's active suspension management, or PASM, which are electronic shock absorbers, and an air suspension. Porsche offers a similar combination in the Panamera and Cayenne. Let's go into the details. The PASM responds to the road surface conditions and the current driving style, constantly adjusting damping for each individual wheel accordingly. Sensors record the body movements generated during fast acceleration, braking, fast cornering, or driving on uneven road surfaces. PASM sends the recorded data to the Porsche 4D chassis control. The 4D chassis control then calculates the current vehicle status and regulates the damper characteristics and spring rates depending on the selected driving mode. What's interesting, the Taycan only uses a single tube damper instead of a conventional twin tube damper. Porsche says this setup is lighter, offers a better response, and is a greater balance between comfort and sportiness. Now to the air suspension. The air suspension has 3 chambers, and Porsche says with these 3 chambers, different air suspension volumes can be switched within milliseconds. Also, the 3-chamber air suspension offers a wide range of spring rates, which can be adjusted in milliseconds, including a low basic spring rate and therefore a more comfortable setup than perhaps expected in this kind of car. This fast adjusting of spring rates helps keep the car stable when accelerating and braking. The engineers also use the air suspension to reduce roll movements by modulating air volume. Of course, the air suspension offers the advantage of ride height control, which means on one side that the vehicle stays the same ride height level regardless of the vehicle load. On the other side, you have the advantage of lowering the ride height to optimize range and performance. The Taycan can lower itself in 2 stages. Firstly, minus 10 mm from a speed of 90 km per hour or 56 miles per hour and above. Secondly, on top of this, minus 12 mm from a speed of 180 km per hour or 112 miles per hour and above. So the Taycan can be lowered by a total of 22 mm. If you choose the driving modes Range and Sport Plus, the chassis is always in the lowest position, which means minus 22 mm. The Taycan has also a lift function by 20 mm, which helps to prevent the front spoiler from bottoming, for example when entering an underground car park. This level can be set at speeds up to 30 km per hour or 19 miles per hour. The Taycan can also be equipped with Porsche Dynamic Chassis Control Sport, PDCC Sport in short, as an option. It is an active roll stabilization system which uses electromechanical anti-roll bars. The system can react in 200 milliseconds to stiffen the anti-roll bars to prevent the body from rolling. This makes PDCC Sport more than 30% faster than comparable systems using hydraulic actuators, says Porsche. Another advantage is the lower energy consumption of the electromechanical system, which is important for an electric vehicle to achieve more range. Porsche is also equipping the Taycan with Porsche Torque Vectoring Plus, PTV Plus in short. It uses an electronically controlled differential lock on the rear axle for variable distribution of the drive torque between the rear wheels. With PTV+, additional yaw torque can be generated on the rear axle by braking the inner wheel on the bend. This makes the vehicle's steering response more agile. Also, it improves traction by locking the differential when accelerating out of corners. At this point, it is perhaps quite interesting that if Porsche would have used two electric motors in the back, Porsche could have achieved the same function. There is the possibility that the two-motor solution is perhaps better because the torque vectoring is achieved in this case without any mechanical system and just by regulating the rotation speed of the two electric engines differently or simultaneously. So no drivetrain losses here and faster reaction times. It seems that Tesla is now going this route, using two electric motors in the back with their upcoming Plate powertrain. Porsche is also implementing one of their newer features, the rear axle steering. The rear axle steering is optional on the Turbo and standard equipment on the Turbo S. Porsche says with rear axle steering, the Taycan steers without delay and builds up lateral acceleration on the rear axle sooner. At low speeds of up to about 50 km per hour or 31 miles per hour, the rear wheel steers in the opposite direction of the front wheels. The steering angle depends on the driving speed and is a maximum of 2.8 degrees. This gives the impression of driving a car with a shorter wheelbase than it really is. Also, it improves dynamic steering response when cornering. At the same time, maneuvering is easier as the turning circle has been reduced by around 60 centimeters to 11.2 meters or 36.75 feet. At speeds faster than approximately 50 km per hour or 31 miles per hour, the rear wheels steer in the same direction as the front axle. Again, the steering angle depends on the driving speed. For the driver, this gives the impression of driving a car with a longer wheelbase than it really is. This increases stability, for example when changing lanes on the motorway. When your Taycan is equipped with rear axle steering, the Taycan automatically features Power Steering Plus with greater support for steering assistance at low speeds. On the Taycan Turbo, you can option Power Steering Plus as a standalone option without the need of ordering rear axle steering on top. I will end the topic of the suspension with the brakes of the Taycan. Porsche has always been a manufacturer with an excellent reputation regarding its brakes, and the Taycan seems to be no exception to this. The Turbo is equipped with the high-performance Porsche Surface Coated Brake, PSCB in short, as standard. The brake discs are 415 mm or 16.3 inch in diameter in the front and 365 mm or 14.37 inch in diameter in the back. Porsche applies a tungsten carbide layer to the grey cast iron discs to increase braking performance and wear resistance. Also, the tungsten carbide layer reduces the amount of brake dust, making the rims dirty. The PSCB is of particular interest for electric vehicles. Why? Because, depending on your driving style, the conventional brake is used less frequently due to recuperation. Porsche's solution with the PSCB keeps the brake discs shiny due to its high resistance to corrosion. Of course, you can option a ceramic composite brake on the Turbo. On the Turbo S, it is standard equipment. The Porsche Ceramic Composite Brake, or PCCB, consists of lightweight ceramic composite brake discs which are 420 mm or 16.54 inch in diameter in the front and 410 mm or 16.14 inch in diameter in the back. Both the Turbo and the Turbo S have 10-piston aluminum monoblock fixed caliber brakes at the front. Porsche says the braking behavior and feeling stays always the same by using a blended braking system, which means the transition between recuperation and real braking can be recognized by the driver. Okay, now to the most important aspect of the Taycan, the powertrain. If you go for the Turbo, you get 680 horsepower in overboost, an acceleration from 0 to 100 km per hour or 62 miles per hour in 3.2 seconds, and 10.6 seconds to 200 km per hour or 124 miles per hour using launch control in both cases. Normally, the turbo has 624 horsepower. If you go for the top model, the Turbo S, you get 761 horsepower in overboost. The acceleration to 100 km per hour or 62 miles per hour takes 2.8 seconds, and to 200 km per hour or 124 miles per hour, the Turbo S needs 9.8 seconds. Also using launch control in both cases. Normally, the Turbo S has also 625 horsepower. The top speed of both Taycan models is limited to 260 km or 161.56 miles per hour. By the way, here in Germany, Tesla limits the Model S performance to 261 km or 162.18 miles per hour. Now the range. The Taycan is not yet rated from the EPA, but we have the European WLTP numbers. They are 450 kilometers or 280 miles for the Turbo and 412 kilometers or 256 miles for the Turbo S. It is important to know that the WLTP ranges are more optimistic than the EPA ranges, so expect less range when the EPA numbers are released. Also here for short comparison, the Tesla Model S performance gets 590 kilometers or 367 miles in the WLTP. The Taycan uses two electric permanently excited synchronous motors, one on the front axle and one on the rear axle. So the car is all-wheel drive. The electric motor, transmission and pulse-controlled inverter are combined into a compact drive module. The rear axle module is installed parallel to the axle, and a pulse-controlled inverter is mounted in a so-called balcony solution to increase the luggage compartment volume. Thanks to its coaxial design, the front axle module is integrated into the front of the vehicle in a very small space. Permanently excited synchronous motors have a rotor with high-quality permanent magnets that generate a natural magnetic field. The rotor thus moves in sync with the magnetic rotating field of the stator, which is why it is known as a permanently excited synchronous motor. A pulse-controlled inverter specifies the frequency of the rotating field in a stator, therefore determining rotor speed. On account of their structure, functionality and their excellent thermal behavior, the permanently excited synchronous motors are able to deliver the high performance the engineers wanted for the Taycan. A special feature of the Taycan's electric motors is the so-called hairpin winding. With hairpin winding, the solenoid coils of the stator consist of rectangular rather than round wires. The wires are bent and their shape, before they are inserted into the stator's laminated core, is reminiscent of that of hairpins, hence the name hairpin. The open ends of the hairpins are welded together using a laser beam. The manufacturing process of hairpin technology is complex, says Porsche, but it allows the wires to be packed more densely and thus increase the amount of copper in the stator. While conventional winding processes have a copper filling factor of 45 to 50%, it is just under 70% with the motors of the Taycan. This increases power output and torque for the same size of the motor. Another important advantage for a high-performance car like the Taycan is that a hairpin stator can be cooled more efficiently. The motor on the front axle has a length of 160 mm or 6.2 inches and a diameter of 190 mm or 7.48 inches. Its counterpart on the rear axle is 210 mm or 8.27 inches long and has a diameter of 245 mm or 9.65 inches. All in all, the modules have the highest power density, in this case kilowatts per liter of package space of all the electric powertrains on the market today, says Porsche. Without pulse-controlled inverters, the electric motors cannot work. So in the Taycan, a pulse-controlled inverter is mounted on each drive module on the front and rear axles. The pulse-controlled inverters convert the direct current supplied by the battery into the alternating current required to drive the electric motors. The reverse is happening during braking. Here they convert the alternating current obtained during recuperation by the motors into direct current for charging the battery. In the Turbo S, a pulse-controlled inverter with a maximum current of 600 amps is used on the front axle, which can generate even more power and torque than the 300 amp pulse-controlled inverter of the Turbo. Both pulse-controlled inverters operate with a high efficiency of almost 98%. Porsche's engineers developed a unique two-speed transmission for the Taycan. Up front, the power of the electric motor is transmitted to the front wheels via a coaxial one-speed planetary gear with an overall ratio of approximately 8:1 to a spur gear differential. In the rear, a two-speed transmission is installed. The first gear gives the Taycan more acceleration from a standing start, while the long second gear ensures high efficiency and power reserves even at high speeds. The two-speed transmission is based on 3 shafts. In addition to the 2 spur gear stages, which technically represent the 8:1 ratio of the second gear, a shiftable planetary gear set is also used, which enables a corresponding reduction of the very short first gear. Here the ratio is then 15:1. This results in a very high wheel torque of almost 12,000 Newton meters or 8,851 pound-feet, which allows fast acceleration from a standing start. Porsche says the first gear is mainly used in Sport mode or Sport Plus mode. Launch control is also available in these modes and uses the first gear. So in normal driving you will mainly use the second gear of the two-speed transmission. Let's talk about recuperation. Porsche takes its own approach for recuperation, which can be seen in these 2 points. Firstly, the maximum potential recuperation capacity of up to 265 kilowatts is greater than that of most of the competitors, says Porsche. This means deaccelerations of up to 3.8 meters per second squared are recuperated. Secondly, when the accelerator pedal is released, the Taycan is designed to always roll as far as possible. So no small bit of recuperation, which means slowing down, that some other electric cars are doing. The policy of Porsche is in this case using the available kinetic energy for dealing with the driving route. But if the driver wants some form of recuperation, the Taycan offers a mode to use a little bit of recuperation when the accelerator pedal is released. And above that, a mode that uses its front camera to detect cars in front and so knowing he can recuperate a bit more and should not coast. So the real recuperation only takes place when the brake pedal is pressed, but then, as mentioned before, with a very high level of energy recovery. For example, the Hyundai Ioniq can recuperate on demand of the driver by using pedal shifters behind the steering wheel or using the brakes. Although this means that the Taycan can't be driven in the so-called one-pedal drive way. Porsche assumes that approximately 90% of braking operations in everyday use are performed by the electric motors alone, without activating the wheel brakes. For this reason, and for the first time ever, Porsche is prescribing a time-dependent replacement interval for the brake pads. They must be replaced every 6 years. For the Turbo, Porsche offers 3 driving modes as standard: Range, Normal and Sport. The driving modes Individual and Sport Plus can be optioned with the Sport Chrono package. The Turbo S has the Sport Chrono package already as standard, so he offers 5 driving modes as standard. Here are the details of the driving modes. Firstly, range. The range mode is made for efficiency. The top speed is limited to between 90 km per hour or 56 miles per hour and 140 km per hour or 87 miles per hour, as per setting by the driver. But it can always be overridden by depressing the accelerator pedal. Driving in this mode means driving with the most efficient all-wheel drive distribution possible. In extreme cases, the Taycan will even drive exclusively on the front axle. Cooling air flaps, chassis height, remember minus 22 mm, and rear spoiler are set to the minimum drag. Air conditioning, hydraulic pumps, air suspension and headlights also operate in their most efficient configurations. Secondly, normal. In this setting, the Taycan delivers its power output on a linear basis. All four wheels are driven. The cooling air flaps are only opened when necessary. The rear spoiler is adjusted depending on the speed and the chassis is lowered as required. The climate control operates without restriction. The air suspension offers full comfort. Thirdly, sport. The highest performance of the powertrain is available in the sport mode. Driver inputs are implemented dynamically. The all-wheel drive changes to a rear bias distribution and is dynamically controlled. The battery's cooling and heating strategy is working performance oriented. The cooling air flaps are thermally controlled depending on the required cooling capacity, while the rear spoiler control is speed dependent. The climate control regulators without restriction. The adaptive cruise control is more dynamic, including more powerful acceleration. Also, the cornering lights functionality is more dynamic. The air suspension lowers the Taycan by up to 22 mm, depending on speed, while the suspension, including rear axle steering, is adjusted to a sporty setup. Finally, Sport Plus. Like in the sport mode, the highest performance of the powertrain is available. Sport Plus puts an even more dynamic spin on the driver's inputs. As a result, the battery's cooling and heating strategy is working for maximum performance. At the same time, the cooling air flaps are always opened. The rear spoiler is extended for minimal lift early on. The chassis setup, including rear axle steering and PDCC, is optimized for maximum racetrack performance, and the chassis is permanently in the lowest position, which means minus 22 mm. Lastly, in the individual mode, some of the modes can be mixed. For example, a normal steering setup and range drivetrain setup. One last information to the powertrain. Porsche is committed to ensuring that full acceleration can be done multiple times in succession. For example, the new Taycan Turbo S is therefore able to reproduce its acceleration time of 2.8 seconds for the sprint from 0 to 100 km per hour or 62 miles per hour 10 times in a row without any problems, using launch control and overboost functionality. So the new Taycan can prove its performance capability multiple times in succession without any drop in performance, for example when accelerating out of bends onto a long straight on the racetrack. Next, the battery of the Taycan. The battery has a waterproof housing using a sandwich construction consisting of a cover at the top and a bulkhead plate at the bottom. A truss-designed battery frame with multiple subdivisions is mounted in between and using an aluminium design. The cooling elements are glued on underneath the bulkhead plate. The battery housing is secured by means of a steel protective plate. Modern joining techniques are used, such as metal welding with inert gases on the battery frame, laser welding on the bulkhead and protection plates, and heat conductive adhesive on the cooling line system under the battery. Porsche says the Taycan is the first production vehicle with a system voltage of 800 volts instead of the usual 400 volts for electric cars. This enables consistent high performance, reduces the charging time, and decreases the weight and installation space of the cabling. The 2-floor battery used in the Taycan contains 33 cell modules consisting of 12 individual cells each, so 396 in total. The total capacity is 93.4 kilowatt-hours. The cells themselves are made by LG and so-called pouch cells. In this cell type, the stack of electrodes is not enclosed by a rigid housing but by a flexible composite foil. This allows optimal use to be made of the rectangular space available for the battery and a reduction in weight. The modules each have an internal control unit for monitoring voltage and temperature and are connected to each other via bus bars. The cooling elements have been placed outside the actual battery box and are glued to its underside to allow heat transfer. The engineers tried hard to dissipate as little heat as possible into the environment and thus be as energy efficient as possible in winter. The battery can also store the waste heat from the liquid-cooled high-voltage components. As a result, it serves as a thermal storage device, which also helps keeping the ideal temperature window of the battery. The target temperature of the battery is determined on the basis of the battery charge, the selected driving program, and the power the driver uses. Also, the speed of charging and the initial charging state of the battery and the desired final charging state is influenced by battery temperature. The Taycan's thermal management centers around an intelligent system for cooling and heating the high-voltage components. This applies in particular to the battery, but also to other components such as onboard DC chargers, DC-DC converters, onboard AC chargers, and drive components such as electric machines, pulse-controlled inverters, and transmissions. The cooling circuit is linked to the vehicle cooling circuit as required. This prevents potential power losses due to excessive heat generation by always delivering the cooling capacity to exactly the components needed. This ensures maximum flexibility for all operating modes and vehicle requirements typical for a Porsche. On the hardware side, the thermal management system consists of a networked line system with a coolant radiator on the front left, 3 coolant pumps, 6 coolant valves, 2 fans, and 10 coolant temperature sensors. This is supplemented by the linked components from the air conditioning system with a climate condenser on the front right, a separate evaporator, and a heat exchanger for the air conditioning and cooling. Porsche calls this module iCont. The circuits used in the thermal management of the Taycan add up to more than 300 states, and the best cooling strategy at a particular moment is always calculated and adjusted from this. Depending on the outside temperature, the battery is preconditioned to a certain temperature level when the vehicle is connected to the mains for charging. The interior can be preconditioned independently of the mains. The vehicle also predicts the electrical power consumption of the air conditioning system and the conditioning of the components based on the outside temperature, humidity and sunshine, as well as the currently selected driving program and the temperature setting of the automatic climate control system. The current range is calculated using these figures. As soon as route guidance is active, the navigation system calculates the fastest or shortest route, taking into account real-time traffic information. If the calculated charging status at the desired destination is less than 13%, the Taycan takes charging stops into account in order to also ensure a minimum range at the destination. In range mode, the value is lowered to 6%. Porsche calls this feature Charging Planner. In order to make optimum use of the available maximum charging capacity, the system also regulates the preconditioning of the battery in good time before the charging stop. Thanks to locally stored database entries, the Charging Planner can also make recommendations for charging stops when the Taycan is offline and has no connection to the internet, for example in rural areas. In a parallel process, the optional PIRM, the Porsche Intelligent Range Manager, provides a background forecast for the other driving programs you can choose. Remember, range, normal, sport, sport plus and individual. When route guidance of the navigation system is activated and the range calculation shows that the destination can be reached only with a low battery charge, the system provides the driver with an option to switch to a more energy-efficient driving program and a different climate control mode. So there is more range left in the battery at the end of the journey. Alternatively, the Intelligent Range Manager can offer to use the range mode when it predicts that a charging stop can be skipped using range mode, which means reaching the destination faster. Taycan drivers can charge their vehicles with up to 11 kilowatts of AC at home. On the road, the vehicle's 800-volt technology allows the vehicle to be charged with higher currents, meaning DC, thus speeding up the process. In just over 5 minutes, the battery can be recharged for a WLTP range of up to 100 kilometers or 62 miles. The charging time for 5 to 80% state of charge is 22.5 minutes in ideal conditions at 800-volt high-power charging stations, with a maximum peak charging capacity of 270 kilowatts. The Taycan has charge ports in the two front side sections of the body. The vehicle can be charged in most markets on both sides using alternating current. On the right-hand side, it can also be charged using direct current. The connections are protected from the weather by electric charge port doors. A small icebreaker ensures that they are still working in heavy frost. It breaks up ice crusts, clearing the way for the port doors. The port doors are opened by means of hand gesture. Alternatively, the electric charge port doors can also be operated from the interior via the center console control panel. For charging at 400-volt charging points, an onboard DC charger with 50 kilowatts is standard, and buyers can options for a 150 kilowatts onboard DC charger. An onboard AC charger with 11 kilowatts for charging using alternating current is also installed. Porsche will offer different charging equipment for at home. For example, the Porsche Mobile Charger Connect with a capacity of up to 11 kilowatts and a built-in display. Also, for example, you can buy the Home Energy Manager, which can be integrated into the domestic power grid by an electrician. The Home Energy Manager optimizes the charging process in terms of performance, time and costs. It also offers protection against overloading the domestic network by reducing the charging power of the vehicle as required in the event of an imminent overload, thus preventing the domestic fuse from being triggered. Porsche plans to introduce more cables, chargers, wall mounts and even a charging pedestal in the coming months, offering more flexibility for the buyer. Porsche also offers the Porsche Charging Service. This charging service enables worldwide access to charging points from various providers, and the billing can take place via centrally stored payment data, though there is no need to register with the various operators. This is done at a guaranteed unit price per market, irrespective of currency. The relevant app and the Porsche navigation system guide customers to the charging station supporting this feature. More than 100,000 charging points will be linked in Europe by the time the Taycan is launched. What's very interesting, the service can be used by all drivers of plug-in hybrid or electric vehicles. The service is not limited to Porsche cars. Porsche is of course supporting the global establishment of fast charging infrastructure, in some cases together with partners. Here are some examples. Right from the start, Porsche plans to offer high-power charging points owned by Porsche with up to 350 kilowatts in Shanghai, Beijing, Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya and London. 2,000 AC charging points in up to 20 markets are planned as Porsche destination charging points. This means, for example, charging in hotels. Ionity, a company from Porsche, Audi, BMW, Daimler and Ford, will build around 400 high-power charging parks with a capacity of up to 350 kilowatts per charging point across Europe by the end of 2020. The Porsche dealer network will also be equipped with 800-volt high-power charging stations, which use the full potential of the Taycan's charging system. In North America, the VW Group initiative Electrify America is offering charging with up to 350 kilowatts at 300 highway stations since this year. Its subsidiary Electrify Canada is also pursuing the development of a high-power charging infrastructure to ensure long-distance mobility on motorways. By 2020, about 32 charging stations will be in operation in Canada. In China, the joint venture Charging as Mobility Service aims to put 4,000 charging points in 20 major Chinese cities into operation by 2020. Lastly, in selected markets, Porsche is working with local partners on the development of a charging infrastructure with selectively installed fast charging corridors. By 2020, more than 60 charging stations are scheduled to be in operation in Australia, Brazil, Malaysia, Mexico, South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, Thailand, and the United Arab Emirates. In the end, Porsche predicts that approximately 80% of Taycan owners will charge their batteries at home overnight. Porsche offers a multi-step review of the owner's individual charging situations at home and the right equipment. With the Porsche Charging Pre-Check, interested parties can find out at an early stage whether charging at their home is generally possible. In a short online survey, information on the living and parking space situation, existing power connections, and internet availability is collected. Based on the responses, the potential customer will receive an initial forecast. If an individual consultation is requested, customers can forward their pre-check ID to a Porsche center. The Porsche centers also offer the home check before the vehicle is purchased. An electrician will check the conditions on site and can also install the charging station at a later date. The Porsche Center will receive a report from the home visit in order to be able to provide the customer with the best possible advice on the choice of charging equipment. Let's talk about sound. The Turbo as well the Turbo S have the Acoustic Vehicle Alerting System, in short AVAS, as standard, which cannot be switched off. The installation of such a generator for warning noises at low speeds for pedestrians has been mandatory in the European Union since July 2019. The European regulation prescribes an AVAS for the protection of other road users up to a speed of 20 km per hour or about 12 miles per hour. A similar situation applies in China and Japan. The regulation defines highly detailed framework conditions on how an AVAS noise may and may not sound. This applies, for example, to the minimum and maximum volume as well to certain noise components. The equivalent regulation in the USA even requires a warning sound when the vehicle is stationary and requires an increase in the noise level until 32 km per hour or about 20 miles per hour. The engineers try to make the sound as emotive, sporty and powerful as possible within the framework of the legal regulations. On top of that, in the Turbo S you have the so-called Porsche Electric Sport Sound as standard, which can be activated by the driver in the Sport Plus mode. In the Turbo it is optional. The engineers minimize disturbing noises from the drive architecture deliberately, and harmonious, emotive sounds matching what the car is doing are amplified. These sounds are composed in such a way that a sound experience typical of Porsche is created. Porsche says it is a clear electrical statement, but unquestionably the sound of a Porsche. Finally, when the AVAS is faded out above the legally required speed ranges, and if the Porsche electric sports sound is switched on, the AVAS sound and the emotive sports sound blend harmoniously with each other. Let's switch to the last part of my in-depth technical information video of the Porsche Taycan, the interior. Porsche says the original 911's cleanly styled dashboard from 1963 was the inspiration for the Taycan. The instrument cluster consists of a curved 16.8-inch screen with the rounded look that is typical of Porsche. Drivers can choose between 4 display modes for the instrument cluster. The mode power meter tries to replicate the typical Porsche style of the rev counter in the middle instrument. The map mode replaces the central power meter with a map layout. The full map mode deactivates the round instruments in favor of a navigation map displayed across the full display. The mode reduced is limited to the essential driving information such as speed, road signs, and navigation instructions using a minimized arrow. And then Porsche added touch control fields and displays everywhere. There are small touch control fields at the edges of the instrument cluster for operating the light and chassis functions. The instrument cluster is therefore wider than the steering wheel and reminiscent of the original 911. A central 10.9-inch infotainment display and an optional 10.9-inch passenger display are combined to form an integrated glass band in a black panel look. Under the central infotainment display, an 8.4-inch touch panel with haptic feedback is placed. This panel allows the air conditioning settings to be altered directly. Integrated handwriting recognition also allows quick address inputs with this panel. Furthermore, if the optional 4-zone automatic climate control system has been ordered, an additional 5.9-inch touch control panel with haptic feedback allows the system to be operated from the rear seats. Porsche also upgraded the air vents. The air flows are now controlled both digitally and fully automatically. Porsche calls it virtual airflow control. There is no possibility to mechanically changing of the air direction by the driver and passenger. Now you use the climate menu. It is possible to switch between focused for fast directional cooling and diffused for drought-free cooling. Tesla uses a comparable technology in their Model 3. Porsche also offers a completely leather-free interior with a material called Race-Tex. It is a microfiber material partially consisting of recycled polyester fibers. Its production releases 80% less CO2 than traditional materials. The floor covering uses the recycled fiber ECONYL, which is made from items like, for example, recycled fishing nets. There is also an option of a substantially tanned club leather called Olea, which uses olive leaves in the tanning process. Also, you can of course upgrade and individualize the Taycan as extensively as we know it from Porsche, changing color and materials on almost every place throughout the interior. Finally, as with the ignition lock on conventional Porsche models, the power button is located on the left behind the steering wheel. Okay, this was much information, but in-depth is in-depth, right? I hope you made it to the end of the video and I thank you very much for watching. I hope if you are a car fan or a Porsche fan, in the market for an EV or especially in the market for the Taycan, or just interested in technical stuff, my video could help you. I am sure my English will improve over the time, and please like, share, subscribe and also hit the notification bell as more videos are coming soon.